We hope you enjoy this episode of the Modern Divorce Podcast. But first, an important message for our listeners.
Embarking on a new chapter? Zach Nutzman of the Darwin Wall team at Realty One Group is your go-to real estate expert in Arizona, specializing in guiding couples and families through their real estate needs while experiencing a divorce. Modern Law's trusted partner, Zach, brings expertise, confidence, and compassion to your real estate journey. Let him help you navigate this challenging time. Zach Nutzman, your modern solution in real estate. Visit ZachSellsAZ.com to get started. Hello and welcome to another special edition of the Modern Divorce Podcast. I am joined today by a mayoral candidate in Gilbert, Natalie DiBernardo. Natalie, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for running for mayor.
Thank you. It's been quite the sprint, though. I got in the race 3 weeks ago, so it's been quite a sprint trying to get all the signatures, but we're doing good, so I'm encouraged.
Fantastic. So you're on track to get all of the signatures that you need. That's exciting.
Yeah. And it's really awesome because I've been out in the community the last 3 weeks talking to everyone, and it's really confirmed the reason why I'm running, so I'm excited about it.
Well, let's start there. What made you decide to run for mayor?
Well, I am an Arizona native. I lived in Gilbert. I decided I wanted to raise my kids in Gilbert. So I've been here about 17, 18 years, and Gilbert is my home. And so I've been involved in our local politics since 2020, since that happened. I just decided to get really involved. And I just have been left feeling the last month that our local government has forgotten to represent the citizens. So I don't see anyone speaking up for us. And so I decided, well, then I'm going to do it for us.
Okay. So you are not happy with the representation that we are currently being given by our Gilbert leadership?
Yeah, I just feel that, half our population is under 30. So we have a very young demographic that's family-centric, and most of our leadership is older. And they have done a great job at getting us to where we are, but I would like to see our leadership represent our demographic better.
All right, so you're running against two other candidates. How are you similar or different from them?
It would take a long time to point out all the differences, but I think one of the main differences is that my experience has made me more community-centric. So I believe in creating an environment and a government that represents its citizens, but that is actually in with their citizens. I'm not a politician. I'm one of you. So everything that we're experiencing as citizens, I'm also experiencing, from the 0.5% tax increase that they're talking about to the roads every day. I saw a kid almost get sucked under a car and get hit by a bike in a crosswalk the other day. So everything that we're going through as a community, I'm experiencing with you. And so I have an invested interest in making sure that collectively we all feel happy to live here like we did when we first came to Gilbert.
So what do you think has changed? So one of your other competitors is Scott Anderson, who is currently the vice mayor. He's been around a long time. So what do you think has changed since he first took office until now? And what is different that we need?
I think a lot of it is there's been a culture shift since he's come in office. And they did a really good job of saying, this is where we want to go as a town. I think what failed to happen is they failed to foresee and have the foresight to some of the problems that would come along with that. I've noticed just a general attitude that we're just going to bury our head in the sand and hope all our problems go away. And small town Gilbert kindness, we don't have problems. And that we saw that in 2020. In 2020, when we were having the protests on Warner Road, the general attitude was, this will die down, it will go away. And so I think that there is some lack of ability to see where we're going and to acknowledge our problems, because we do have big city problems. We're still a town, but I mean, the traffic is more dangerous. I'm scared for my teenagers to ride their bikes across the street to go to the gas station. I've almost gotten hit by a car in a crosswalk walking with my children. We have, increases in water, increases in crime. And, you know, even though we still have the heart of a town and we all came to this community to be a part of it, I don't think we really have the systems nailed down in place to keep that environment going with as many people as we have.
Okay. So how would you address these, problems that just come with growth?
Right. They do. And I have a lot of questions. So one thing I would love to see happen is more study sessions where the council can actually get together as a group and discuss issues without breaking open meeting laws, but also with the community. Then the community can speak and ask questions, and there can be back and forth dialogue to try to figure out where some of these problems are coming from. I've noticed, and the community has noticed that there seems to be a lack of communication, or if there is communication happening, then we as citizens don't know where to find that information. And so starting there is a great place to say, I'm concerned, and I have been concerned for a long time. What is our police force doing to keep up with what is happening? So we had, in 1999, we had the Devil Dogs at Highland High School, and they were a white supremacist gang that beat up kids. And then they had Sammy the Bull running an ecstasy ring out of Highland. And, why we didn't kind of change some of our systems back then is beyond me, because now we're having similar problems again. So I think we need to start looking at, do our police have enough resources? Do they have people that are trained well enough? Do we need to bring in experts with gang task force or even drug task force? It's not just, I know right now teen violence is highlighted, but we've had a domestic violence problem in Gilbert. We saw a spike. Everyone across the nation saw a spike during COVID. So we have a lot of problems, and we need to be asking the questions of, are we putting enough resources towards the schools, towards the people on the front lines who are dealing with a lot of these problems?
I definitely do want to talk about that. But I was just wondering, from a traffic standpoint, we've grown, we have big roads, they run really fast. It's dangerous for pedestrians and bikers. Like, what would you suggest we do?
So we definitely need to put more money into our traffic safety. And I really appreciate they're having their budget discussions right now, and they were talking about cutting some things. And I really appreciate young Kapowski stood up and said, wait, we can't cut these traffic lights. We have to put these in. And so I think we need to make sure that we're cutting budgets in the places that need to be cut, but also making sure that we're spending it on our traffic, because we need more traffic lights. I've heard from people it takes them 10 minutes to turn right off of Galveston and Wrecker, right? There shouldn't be that much traffic down there, but they need a traffic light. We need things like that. And then I think I think the residents are asking for responsible growth and halting that a little bit. So we had a 3-story apartment complex on Wrecker and Williamsfield that was approved. They just approved with a 6-1 vote to make it 5 stories. So they also took away the easement on that road, so we can't expand that road anymore. Mm-hmm. And that area is my hood, and it is already very busy. So the big 5-story buildings, our roads just can't handle that kind of growth. And the people are asking, if that growth happens, to be involved in determining if we can handle it or not as a town, right? Mm-hmm. So I just think that the growth for right now, we need to really make sure that if we're approving projects, that first of all, the developers are paying for that extra wear and tear that they're putting on the system, and that the citizens are communicated with.
I definitely agree with you. Like, I don't know what Scott Anderson's position on anything is, and I've been paying attention, and I just don't know. But it's not just him. It's really all of the town council in general. I don't know what their position is, even though I want to know. And I think that that's probably true for a lot of people. Now, your other competitor, Shane Krauser, he has been very outspoken about his beliefs, what he wants to accomplish. Tell me, where do you and he diverge?
We diverge in a lot of areas, I think. I think we have similar views on making sure our spending is responsible, making sure safety is a number one priority, making sure that our leadership is held accountable. Accountability is a big deal. If you're going to be a leader, and sorry, my bird is whistling at us. If you're going to be a leader, then you need to take accountability for how you vote and what you say. So I think that we agree on those things. I think that the difference is that, on your podcast, I watched his interview and he said, I'm an equal opportunity hater. And that really struck me because that is not something that crosses my mind or my vocabulary at any time. I was raised by two hippie pastors. So even when I don't agree with people, that kind of attitude and leadership doesn't serve people well. So I think that my heart is to serve people. And I'm not saying that's not his heart, but that is something that struck me as being very different from his style versus mine.
Okay. So he seems a little bit more aggressive.
Yes. A little bit more aggressive and possibly less in tune with what people are wanting as a whole. I know he is more versed in the actual political party system. And I don't adhere to that system as well, because I think that even if I don't agree with you, everyone deserves to be represented and listened to. And so I would think that might be a little bit different between he and I as well.
All right. So it sounds like your vision for the city is to unify it as much as you can.
It is because we have such complex and subtle problems, which is they're opposite of each other, but we have these huge problems, but we also need complex and subtle changes. And so subtle changes look like communication. If the information is there, maybe it's a matter of the website not being a good format. I don't know if you've been on the Gilbert website for town council, but it's hard to find last agenda meetings. You kind of have to know what meeting it occurred in, making it more user-friendly so that people can use it. Those are some subtle changes that could happen that would really help. But the complex problems, like the problems we're having in schools and all of that, it takes communities working together to get that done. So if you're not unified, you can't get anything done. And I mean, you're a divorce lawyer, right? So you've seen the gamut of, I say the town is the child, we're the parents, and divorces, when both parents don't agree, they can't work it out, when their main objective is to take care of that child, they can navigate complex things and it always benefits the child. When they can't, the child is always the one that gets left, right? And really, so that's how I feel about it.
It's just very interesting that you say that, because the very first town council meeting that I ever went to, I watched people on council just bicker and treat each other poorly. And that place was packed with a bunch of people like me who were there for the very first time, because we were showing up and we were super concerned about our teenagers being safe. And what we saw was not two parents that were aligned for the benefit of the children to fix the problems. We didn't. It felt to me exactly like the parents that I counsel to stop fighting in front of your kids. Like, do that behind closed doors. And their answer is essentially, well, we can't do it behind closed doors because of open meeting law.
Yep. And those do need to change. But there's still, I'm Italian and I can be very blunt and very harsh occasionally with just the way that it comes out of my mouth. And so I get that sometimes that dialogue is not comfortable, but there is a level of professionalism, in my opinion, that should be maintained at all time. And if it's not, I think it's perfectly acceptable to call that out. And I know that I'm just saying that. I've never served on the dais, so I don't have the experience to be able to say if that's possible or not. But every company I have ever been in, I don't agree with everyone. And that doesn't mean that we get to say whatever we want to each other, because it's just because we can say what we want doesn't mean we should. So there's some of that needs to change. And again, we as adults are modeling the behavior that our kids do. So we have a teen violence problem, and us as leaders, it's our job to model the behavior we want to see. And bickering and the fighting and the backhanded bullying is not something we want modeled for our community.
So you realize you may be walking into a toxic leadership.
Yep, I'm prepared for that. I have a lot of training. I have a very unique perspective in my life. My stepdaughter was killed in 2017 by her boyfriend in an act of domestic violence. And so I have had to, we have a very, very big community. My parents are pastors forever. I have a very large community. And I had to decide, do we dig in and let this ruin us, or do we move forward? Because you don't really ever move on, but you can move forward. And so I had to get a bunch of skills to navigate all of these toxic patterns and the things that just happen when you're, you have a loss that you can never recover from. And I had to lead my community in that, because when you experience something like that, the community looks at you to watch and say, we're going to do what you do. How are we responding to this? So I have a lot of training in conflict resolution and actually just in trauma. And my family has a preschool in Gilbert. And so we have a trauma-informed program for them where we train the teachers how to help themselves be right and not be toxic, and then invite the kids to do the same. And that is applicable to adults as well. I use it in my businesses. I use it with my teenagers. It's important to have in the society that we live in, because the world that we live in really has never existed before.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I know I watched our community in 2020 and in 2021, and maybe even later, just be hit with trauma after trauma after trauma. And that was real. I watched it shake my employees. Like, we can't all collectively go through that amount of isolation and anxiety and panic and danger and shutdowns and uncertainty and not have consequences. So one of the things I really love is your desire to unify and not just kind of bulldoze your agenda through. I think that's really great.
Yeah, you can't. And that's the thing, is that I feel like it's not my agenda. It's the community asking for, because we have gone through a lot collectively. And now with what we're going through now, it's compounding on each other. And we see that in our teenagers. The last statistic that they had with kids under 18 going through trauma and all the statistics prior to 2020, the statistic on average of teenagers that would have a depressive episode. In boys, it was 4 to 5%, and in girls, it was 12%. So
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And actually that was 2012. And then the next time they did the study was in 2021, and girls jumped to 30% and boys jumped to 12%. And so what we see a lot of the times with girls is this internalizing, where they cut themselves. They tend to make themselves miserable. What we see with boys is them having an external episode, which is being violent, being defiant, bad grades, stuff like that. And then we call it, oh, they're being horrible, bad kids. But really, they're having these depressive episodes that we don't recognize as depression. So that kind of world we've never lived in. And so to me, being a leader, if you don't understand what the community is going through mentally, how are you going to understand what they need? And, people have said to me, some of the leadership has said to me, well, it sounds kind of kumbaya-ish. I'm like, well, don't you want that? Don't we want that? I mean, I don't think that it's a bad thing to bring your best intentions and best hopes. I think it's possible. I think people want that. That's why we all moved here. I think people are willing to do the work for that kind of environment.
Yeah, I agree with you. I really did feel like I lived in a kumbaya world. I did. And my brother moved here recently, and we would, drive around, his family and my family. We'd just be looking at this just beautiful, wonderful, idyllic place with all these resources. And I really felt like I lived in this perfect little bubble. And then it burst with Gilbert Goons. And so let's talk about that. What is your opinion on the way that this situation has been handled?
I have been very vocal that I'm not really happy with the way that it has been handled. I've been very critical of the teen violence subcommittee, just because I think that it hasn't really produced the results that they had hoped. And I felt that way from the beginning. And it's probably because it's easy for me to point out what I would have done differently, because I've been doing something differently since 2017, right? So I have a lot of experience, and I think what they should have done is kicked that to that task to the community task force, because they don't have the open meeting laws that they have to adhere to. They could have brought on more mental health specialists and kind of given that committee that task force a better opportunity to be long lasting and to see this thing through. So I don't think that was the right way to go. I said, I think it's the division committee, because I've seen the women kind of be cut out. And to the councilman's credit, they reached out and said, we didn't mean to cut out the women. And I don't believe that it was intentional, but that seems to happen often in our community, where things get carried away and the moms and the women are saying, hey, what about us? We would like to talk too. So I've been disappointed in that. And I just have a lot of questions I feel like haven't been communicated. Because again, it goes back to the communication.
All right. So you're unhappy with the subcommittee.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about the police?
I have questions, and that's my thing. I am a firm believer. I know people are saying, oh, the police chief needs to go, this person needs to go. And I'm a believer in people are following the system. So if something happened, we need to, if there's cover up, if there's, which so far we have not seen as things have been coming out. But if things are going on, we need to look at where did the system fail us? Is it a reporting issue? Are we not able to link these crimes happening together? Is it an issue where we just don't have enough experience with gangs that we recognize a more organized crime when we see one? I have a lot of questions for how our crime reporting is handled, because I work with rape victims and do a little bit of victim advocacy with them. And I've seen it over and over again where the system fails the victim. So I think we have a lot of areas in our police force where the victims are not really protected as well as they should. And if we fire police officers and if we fire police chiefs, it doesn't fix the problem. We'll bring in a new person and have the same problem. So that is what I would like to see. I would like to see a study session done where the council can ask, what happened? How do you report? Because that's what the community wants to know. The community wants to know this couldn't have been prevented.
Well, I just think that there's far too much information indicating that it could have been prevented. And there's far too much information that indicates we haven't used the reporting mechanisms that are available to us. When Mesa Police Chief comes out and gets a whiff of it and says, oh, we have this fusion center, we have all of these resources for regional cooperation, for gang resources, and Gilbert's response is, we didn't miss a thing. I just don't know how that can be okay.
Well, I'm concerned about the police relationship with the community, because in Gilbert, that has kept us really solid. I mean, even with my kids in our community, they know the neighbors are going to watch out. They know the police are going to watch out. And so I want to make sure that the community feels safe knowing if I call the police, they're going to do something. If there's a crime, that's going to be reported and taken seriously. And so that's my angle, is trying to figure out how we can communicate with the police, with the community, with victims to try to get that trust back, right?
Yeah. And the prevailing theory is that, Gilbert is also named kindness. I don't know if all the listeners know this, but Gilbert is literally AKA kindness. You can write a letter to Kindness, Arizona, and it will come to Gilbert. So this perception that we all have as residents, it was curated. It was curated. We were told, you live in this beautiful, safe bubble, and year after year, we're going to come out with articles about how safe we are. And now it appears like the best prevailing theory is there's a pattern of not documenting crime because it would hurt the statistics. Now, if that's true, and we have to begin documenting all of the crime, that's going to hurt our statistics, which is going to hurt Gilbert. What do you think about that?
Well, I actually think it's really interesting, because if you look at the statistics, they're relatively similar. And even if you say every Gilbert Goon crime, if it was reported differently, still it wouldn't have made a huge dent in the statistic because everything else is being reported. However, what has happened?
How can we be confident that other crimes?
Well, that's true.
How are we supposed to have any confidence that crimes that were called in were actually reported?
Yeah, and that's why we need a really good look with a study session, and possibly, I know other police communities will do audits. They'll have a third person come in and kind of audit their system to see, not as like, hey, we're going to punish everybody, right, but just where is the system failing? Because we do need accurate reporting. We really do. And that's where accountability comes in with leadership, right? Leaders need to be accountable so that we know what's going on and so that everyone is on the same page. So there are police forces that have done stuff like that, especially during COVID. And I would like to see, us ask those questions to figure that out. But with 2019 is when TikTok really took off. And I think what we're seeing is stuff we normally didn't see as far as crimes we're now seeing because they're on TikTok. They're more accessible to us. So we're seeing it a lot more. And that I think is part of the perception of it. But also I loved the Gilbert Kindness campaign. When it came out, I was like, this is because that's how I feel about living here. And then as it grew, mainly after COVID, we all kind of came out of our houses and I realized, oh, there's a lot of new people here. And I don't know if they got the memo about the Gilbert Kindness because it has just, there's been a general attitude shift. But that's why, to me, it's from the top down. So if we can get back to leadership that is more unified, then hopefully will trickle down to every single, government agency and town member we have. I know that it's possible, and people think, oh, it's possible. I know it's possible. I've seen it.
Well, right. We're not destined to be in a state where our leadership hates each other and is in a boxing match all the time. We are not destined for that. There is another option, and it is a well-functioning, emotionally mature leadership. So I totally agree.
Yeah. And even when bad things happen in our community, because they will happen. That is the nature of life. It's how our leadership and how we respond to that can make or break us. Right.
Absolutely.
And that is what the community is asking for. And that's kind of what I saw lacking. I said, I don't see a leader right now that I feel is capable to do that.
Yeah. Capable or willing. One or the other.
Yeah. And the reason I'm running too as mayor and not as town council or something else is because the mayor has a unique power. She or he has one vote, same as everyone else, but she can put agenda items on the agenda without the other votes, and she can do study sessions without other votes. And I think that is an underutilized, very important. If they're not able to talk, it needs to be an agenda item so that they can talk about it.
I really appreciate
we need to see it. Right. As the community, we need to be able to watch it.
I really appreciate all of your practical solutions that you've thrown out here. I think people are really going to appreciate that. The last thing I want to ask you is one of the things that you said when you spoke to the town council. You talked about how your family had experienced violence. You've talked here about how you lost your stepdaughter to domestic violence. And you said something about being, years ahead of where these other leaders were just trying to catch up. Can you describe what that means? Like, what is the path forward to address the violence in the community?
Yeah. So, it's a very complicated explanation, but yeah, I could explain it. So number one, not burying your head in the sand, right? Because I feel like there's a lot of that going on, and it's easy to do that. I tried to do that with myself. I said, I'm going to stay in this room and I'm not coming out, right? Because that's just where it's safe. But until you really feel the weight of the awfulness of the situation, until you acknowledge the situation, you can't move forward. You have to look at the damage and say, how are we going to fix this? And so I feel like that's lacking, right? Because as someone who's experienced all this, I have studied and studied and studied and talked to people, and I know where it's coming from. I know where it's going. We've been having these conversations of what's happening in our schools for years. A lot of people on the council, young Kaprowski has children in the school system, but if you have kids in the school system today, it's not even what it was when my stepdaughter graduated in 2012. It is the last 5 years it's changed. So there's a lot of that as the younger demographic that we've seen, that it's going to take us forever for us to explain to you, kids airdropping pictures to everyone, all the things that our kids go through on a daily basis at these schools. It's going to take 2-hour subcommittee meeting just for me to explain that, right? And then to explain the developments they've made in community response to traumas and how the community responds. And so that is a big part of it, is just catching them up with the education of what is happening psychologically, mentally, physically now versus even 5 years ago. It's completely changed.
I do agree. Yeah. The world has changed. Many of us didn't necessarily know. I've talked to so many parents who've said, yeah, my kids were telling me all of these things, and I just thought they were exaggerating because it sounded like How can my kid's high school be a war zone? So let's
Right.
talk for a minute about schools. They're obviously struggling. I haven't heard anything from school boards about how they want to handle it.
Yeah, and that's frustrating too, because obviously the town council is different from the school
Right.
boards. They run themselves. However, there does also, again, seem to be, at least in communities' eyes, the lack of communication. It might be happening. I don't see it. But my kids were in the public school system at Higley, and there was a communication problem there too. And I've heard they have a great superintendent now and things are going well. But the schools need attention. Even people are saying, oh, they need more money. They probably need all of the things, honestly. I love school choice. And one of the unintended consequences of school choice is we left public schools unattended, right? We said, okay, you're on your own. Look at all the kids are going over here. And they just need more attention. We have a lot of involvement with our town council when we should be going to those school meetings, right? We should be involved. And it's hard to get involved. But if we don't get involved, nothing is going to happen. It is the town's job and the school board's job to communicate with us. As leaders, they need to be responsible for that communication. However, it is our job as citizens to do everything in our power to make sure they hear us. And that's not really going on from what I'm seeing either.
I want to ask you about that before I let you go. What is the best way for citizens to be communicating to leadership?
Well, right now, you can go to the town council meeting and speak, but they cannot speak back to you. So I don't think that is super efficient. I've also seen that become more like a culture of complaining and not bringing solutions. So it's a great place if you're just mad and you want to bark at someone and get your gripes out. But I would personally love to see citizens go to the town council meetings and bring solutions, right? Because our town is full of educated, smart, good people with good ideas, and the town needs to hear those ideas. My sister does a lot of therapy work with animals, and she wanted to bring in therapy dogs to schools and talk about that. And it just kind of gets lost and shut down. There's not really a good pathway for communication. Right now, the town encourages emails. There has been a lot of complaints from citizens. Those emails don't get answered. And the town council in a meeting in February recently suggested that we cut comments from citizens, or we shorten the time to be about 15 minutes, so that the developers' lawyers didn't have to wait, because the developers' lawyers are sitting there for an hour or however long, getting paid $400 an hour. And I would like to see our council give the citizens just as much respect and communication as they give our developers, right? Because everybody deserves that. We all deserve to be communicated with. So right now they're saying emails. You can reach out, and some of the council members are really good about reaching out and reaching back. So if you don't hear from one, try another.
Is there any reason that we can't set up meetings with the council members, or do they not do that?
You can. It's harder to get done sometimes just with scheduling, but you can. I know they set them.
Okay, it's wonderful. Natalie DiBernardo, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for running. I think the more voices, the better, the more perspectives, the better, the more choices, the better. So thank you so much for putting your name out there and being willing to tackle this in a very, very tough time.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I always tell people this. Me running is really not about me. It's about also showing people you can do it. You don't have to be this politician. You can do it. We're responsible for our community, and it's not as scary as you would think. And we need to come together and all run, because we're the reason we have what we have in our town. So if you're out there and you're not sure if you want to get involved, run for office. I think you should do it.
I love that. That's a great message. Thank you so much. Oh, how do people sign you need signatures in order to move forward? Is that correct?
I do. So we need signatures, and we always try to get over the amount in case the other people running try to challenge, because they'll come in and say, let's do an audit. And then I have to spend $4,000 or $5,000 to audit signatures. So we always like to get an overage. So I'm really working on that right now. So if you go to votenatalie.com, there's a link to my online petition, and it will automatically verify you off your driver's license number. And it's super simple. So
and
if
people can sign for more than one candidate, right?
They're not supposed to.
Oh,
no.
Okay. Okay.
So that's
But
one
this
thing they
is
look for.
votes.
Yeah. So 1,000 people to sign is the minimum.
Okay.
And then that gets your name printed on the actual ballot. So I'm still technically a candidate. I just haven't turned in signatures yet. So
Got it.
yeah, so I want to be printed on the ballot because my last name is too complicated to write down.
It is, isn't it? Us as healthy girls, we have to deal with it.
No.
Fine. Thank you so much. I loved getting to know you a little bit more. Thank you for sharing your perspectives, and we will talk again soon.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening to the Modern Divorce Podcast. Remember, anything you've heard today or anything you read online is not the replacement for actual consultation with an attorney and does not create an attorney-client relationship. Even if you called in and we spoke to you, you were anonymous and we don't have your details and you have not become a client of Modern Law. However, we would love to speak with you, or you should seek out the advice of legal counsel or counseling or any other expert near you. And if you have an idea for a show topic or you need to speak with an attorney in Arizona, you can reach me at info@mymodernlaw.com.